Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. If you recall, we were discussing attitudes and behaviors. In those discussions, we had been focusing on the fact that behaviors actually reflect attitudes, and since we cannot see an attitude, we look at the behavior to understand what is attitude. Now then, we also looked at how attitudes are formed. Having discussed all those areas, now we are interested as marketers that if there is a negative or a neutral attitude, which means कि किसी चीज के मुतालिक हमारे पास कोई ख्याल ही ना हो, or we are not evaluating it either good or bad, so how should the marketer change this attitude to bring it onto the positive side? Because we have been discussing that when we have a positive attitude, the likelihood that we will buy the product becomes higher. If we are looking at from that point of view of how to bring change in attitude, then we have about 4 or 5 methodologies which are being discussed in literature and have been extensively researched. Now, for example, we can change the motivational factors. We have already discussed it, that motivation is one area which forces a person to buy, and from there attitudes take place, or there is a motivation to have a particular attitude because of certain influences, and we can change those. Second method that we will be discussing is when we associate the product or the object, the attitude object, with a particular group or a particular personality, we can bring change there too. We will discuss that. Third is, we have found in research that sometimes people do not behave in a particular manner because they have conflicting attitudes, which means एक ही चीज के हवाले से they might have two attitudes. One may be positive, the other may be negative. And the issue, therefore, for the marketer is how to resolve these two and bring the customer to the point where he will get a positive linkage and he will have a positive attitude towards the final product or object, and he will then be inclined to buy it. Fourth, we will be looking at is altering the components of the multi-attribute model. Remember that the multi-attribute model was typically related to the object itself, whereas the motivational factors is linked with the person's own motivation that is inside the person, what happens. So we have these two distinct points. One relates to the inside, and we would like to be able to see how we can bring those changes. Second, we will look at the object itself and see how we can shift the various attributes to bring about a change. Then we can also look at another factor where we will be able to bring about change through the competitive product being positioned in a different form. Let me give you an example in this case, and then we can move on to the further discussions. The model suggests that if I was to suggest that I am number one against a particular product, how can I do that? By either changing the attitude of the people of that competitive product. That means I somehow or the other bring that product down in terms of some attribute, some factor, and by doing this, by bringing the product at a lower point, automatically without making any change in my own product concept, I can bring that product higher. So one of the two methods, either I raise my product to a higher level, or I bring about a reduction in the product itself, the competitive brand. For example, Motrin is a painkiller, a medicine to elevate pain. अब वो क्या क्लेम करते हैं in the same context के वो competitors के मुकाबले में, वो कहते हैं कि there is no other brand or product which can have such an effective impact on pain. उसमें वो एडविल एक दवाई है, उसके मुकाबले में, या एक कैल्पोल है, उसके मुकाबले में उनका कहना ये है कि हमारा प्रोडक्ट जो है या मोट्रिन जो है वो सबसे ज़्यादा स्ट्रॉन्ग है और उसके मुकाबले में और कोई नहीं. इसी तरह से मे बी वी हैव अनदर प्रोडक्ट, मे बी अ क्लीनिंग डिश क्लीनिंग लिक्विड और सम क्लीनिंग पाउडर विच मे क्लेम कि कुछ स्टेन्स ऐसे हैं, कुछ दाग ऐसे हैं विच the other brand cannot clear, but this brand, that is the brand that is being offered, can clear. Now, होता क्या है कि at the point of time, for example, Clorox है. अब Clorox claim करता है कि we are very good in cleaning. Now, let's say Mr. Clean comes along, another brand comes along and says कि oil का जो दाग है वो Mr. Clean साफ कर सकता है, Clorox नहीं करता. Now, this brings what I said as the form of bringing competitive brand को एक तरह से ऐसी पोजीशन पे लाया जाए कि एटीट्यूड चेंज हो जाए, और उसके पीछे ये चीज याद रखने की है कि the brand must perform in that particular category. And you would have seen a number of ads, particularly Surf ka ya Bright ads, and all these kind of washing powders normally tend to show this कि ये एक तरह में दवाई डाली सफाई नहीं हुई, but when the second one, that is the one that I am selling, is poured in the washing bowls or cleaning area, तो वहाँ एकदम सफाई हो जाती है. This is one frame, but याद रखने की चीज ये है, what I said about there is an issue here. The issue particularly is, number one, you will have to prove that you are right. You cannot just make a claim. When you target another competitive product, then ethically as well as legally, you have to show that this is what it can do in comparison with the other. Otherwise, there could be a libel suit, which means आपको challenge किया जा सकता है courts में. Second issue is कि when you talk about the two brands, तो आप बगैर सोचे दूसरे ब्रांड को भी अपनी कैंपेन में दे रहे हैं, एक किस्म की एक्सपोजर दे रहे हैं. मिसाल के तौर पे when you are using a comparative name, you will be also using the name of that in your advertising, and when you do that, the advertising message is still going to people, and it is possible that somebody listens to it without knowing the context and hears the name and may generate another perception. So we have to be very careful how we use these comparative advertisements. Finally, we have what we call elaborative likelihood method. This particular aspect of change is not related to the action of change or the idea how to bring about change, but it relates to the process in which change takes place. And this is directly linked, this particular model of bringing about change is directly linked with what we talked about, the core approach or the central route to creating an attitude, or the peripheral route. If you recall that in the central route, we had talked about cognitive areas where very important factors were that you give more information, more knowledge, more frameworks so that the attitude can be changed. This is very effectively used by marketers in their approach when they are giving comparatives. For example, when the company gives information, detailed information of a number of products based on various criteria, and they do not try and force the person to, or they do not suggest a result in terms of what is better or not, but they just say what is available in a particular product, what is not available in another product, and it's a range of information that is provided, and the information is allowed to go to the recipient, which is the consumer, who then tries to conclude on his own, giving importance to factors which he thinks important. And obviously, the marketers try to figure out what are the important points. And on those points, they give their own brands and own products higher scores so that the consumer can conclude that their brand is better, or their product or object is better than the comparative products or objects available in the market. This was the route where we talked about the central approach, which means a lot of cognitive thinking processes take place. The second one was the peripheral one, where we had discussed that sometimes only the aesthetics, the quality of the image might create a positive attitude. So the process of how to reach, how the elaboration takes place about an attitude is the final model that we have just been discussing. Now, before we go into the two very strong models which have further components, for example, change in the motivational frameworks or change in the attribute, the multi-attribute model, we will take a look at those two frames that will be simple but very commonly used. Now, one of the frames is what I talked about, the associative model, which tries to link the object or the product with a group, with a cause, or with a personality. And the assumption is that this linkage will create a positive attitude. We have more recently seen companies trying to suggest that, let's say, जो भी कीमत आप पे करेंगे अपने प्रोडक्ट की, उसमें से 10% हिस्सा जो है वो किसी कॉज में चला जाएगा. मिसाल के तौर पे वो कंपनी ये कहती है कि अगर आप हमारा प्रोडक्ट खरीदेंगे तो इस प्राइस में से हम 10% कंट्रीब्यूट करेंगे, मिसाल के तौर पे एडी को या शौकत खानम मेमोरियल हॉस्पिटल को या किसी ऐसे ग्रुप को या ऐसी एक कॉज को जो लोगों के जहन में is very important. This relates to the concept of CSR, which is corporate social responsibility, which is becoming a very important topic, but at this point we will not be discussing much about it. But the idea is that there is something more that companies do. Companies just don't make profits and just do not maximize their shareholders' wealth, but they are also contributing beyond their normal business or commercial activities to the uplifting of the environment in which they live. So they are also creating benefits. Now, therefore, this logic of associating the product with a particular cause is used so that people who have a positive attitude towards the cause can then shift that frame towards the product also. Because if you are supporting a good cause, then logic says that you must be a good product, because अगर cause ने आपको अपने साथ associate किया तो चूंकि cause अच्छी है तो उसकी association भी अच्छी होगी. This is something which we are seeing quite rapidly evolving. मिसाल के तौर पे some companies try to say that we try and support the environmental change, we keep the country clean or we keep the city clean, and they provide, sometimes they even provide specific, for example, bins, dust bins or collection bins, which are marked by that company's name, which means they are particularly supporting a particular cause. So this association becomes a critical frame of bringing about positive change to the products. Third is when there is a conflict between attitudes and the marketer knows that this conflict exists. And remember, all this discussion about attitudes and behavior relates to the fact that we normally directly cannot influence the behavior. It must come through a change in the attitude. Now, we should be able to understand that sometimes, for example, I'll give you an example about a product and then see what conflicting issues we are talking about. I'm a photographer. I'm interested in now buying a new camera which can give me a bigger negative so I can work in my darkroom on it. Wo camera is costly. But I also know, which is now my positive attitude, that I would like to work with larger negatives in my color lab where I can do good job on it. But on the other hand, I also know that digital cameras are now coming in, which will make photography easy, and I can only use a computer to do the same work. Ab ye conflict hai. Now, this attitude towards a new product, I mean, in the future could be launched or is being available, can create a negative attitude towards my desire, which is a positive one, to work in a negative, on a larger negative, or 35mm camera. Now, if I knew this as a marketer, that this kind of a conflict exists, then I can provide solutions to the person. For example, I can say, you buy 35, and whenever the digital camera becomes available, all you have to do is to swap that camera. And with a little bit extra payment, we will give you the new digital camera. Or we can, if we can, develop a product of that kind where we say, okay, here is a 35mm camera for you now, but it also has features or compatibility to be able to work with computers. So whenever I feel that I've finished my hobby of using larger negatives to work with in my lab, and I want to switch over to the digital camera, I can do it. This is what you now find in most of the large screen, what you call HD TVs, which try and suggest that the current system is compatible with high definition TV systems. Now we have covered more or less 4 of the aspects that I talked to you about in bringing about change, which were simple standalone systems. For example, we have discussed association with a group or a cause. We have also talked about conflicting of attitudes, and how can we resolve that. We also discussed competitive brand and how do we relate to the competitive brands. Finally, we also looked at the elaborative likelihood method, which means how does the process take place, and how does the process of attitude can be elaborated. Now we would like to look at those 2 significant models which have their own subsystems. The one was about motivation, and the other was about the object itself in terms of the attributes. Now, changing the key motivational functions would relate to these 4 aspects. Number 1, we can rearrange knowledge. We can look at the value expressive function. We can bring about a change in the utilitarian function. And we can also look at the ego defensive function as a method of bringing change. Now, the concept of a value expressive function, for example, was that we already understand that if there is my lifestyle or my value systems, if the marketer understood that, and some way, if there is a product that he wants to bring about a positive change in the mind of the consumer, and I can associate the product or the brand with the value system in some form, then I will be able to bring about this change from no attitude or a negative attitude to a neutral or a positive attitude. And particularly, it is very significant. For example, if I am a high-tech interested person, at this point of time, the new television sets have come into position. They are HD TV. However, I have no inclination at this point because I already own a flat screen, and I don't know why should I go for a new one. Now, if the person starts highlighting, the company starts highlighting the technological advances that are inherent in the product, it is possible that over a period of time, I start looking at that product as an important one, and my attitude, which was neutral to a high definition TV screen or a plasma screen, I might start thinking, oh, this may be a better product, and slowly over time, I can change my attitude. So through the value expressive function, we can try and link the product or the object that we want to propose with the internal motivational or the value or the lifestyle of the individual, and shift the attitude towards the positive side for the particular product. The second one is the utilitarian function, which is basically that we propose a utility which in the first stage might not have been recognized, or we might find that these people or the target market would be very happy to have a new utility, or we can propose a utility. And utility means just a use, a खास use है, particularly अगर किसी product के अंदर हम उस use को add कर दें. मिसाल के तौर पे आपके पास tissues होते हैं. Now, tissue is something which we normally use for drying the face or clearing the face or wiping out something. But एक शख्स को ये पता हो और ये company को ये पता हो कि people also like to have a nice smell. So we can add a utility in it that this also provides good smell. So if you put it in your pocket, perfume or scent will be something that will be attractive. Now, logic में ये utility अगर एक कायम कर दी गई तो उससे एक नई चीज और नया innovation या एक product के अंदर एक ऐसी चीज पैदा हुई जो किसी group को या target को would be more in terms of utility. We can add, for example, simple tissue paper, again having the capability or the utility of killing germs. There are a number of products which are now being put into the market. मिसाल के तौर पे लोगों को पता है कि they normally clean the refrigerators. Now, sometimes people clean the refrigerators with the help of tissues or kitchen towels. But another company might come around and provide a kitchen towel or napkins or cleaning tissues which have this capability of being hygienic and germ killer aspects in it, so that people will use it to clean the refrigerator or their frigidaire, whatever, so that it helps them in their work. Now, the third particular aspect is when we look at the ego defensive function. इसका logic क्या है ego defensive function का? Ego defensive function का logic ये है कि some people try and look at their personalities and they become defensive about their egos. और उनको परेशानी ये होती है कि कोई चीज वो इस्तेमाल करें तो कहीं वो उन पे negative reflection ना हो. So now what the marketer tends to do is that he wants to bring about an attitude positive toward the product by repeatedly telling the person that if you use it, it will be something of benefit to you. And this kind of function becomes very critical when we are looking at the products such as beauty care products, because there are products which can have a very socialistic impact. If you recall, a few months back or some time back, there was an ad about a lady who was using a particular brand or a particular product which actually was not helping her skin to clear or was having problems. Now, the marketers tried to use that fear or ego defensiveness and try to convince the person that this product that if you use will not make you feel unhappy, will not have an impact that you will be embarrassed among the people. This becomes a very critical point in which ego defensive frames are normally brought into position. The fourth one that we would like to look at is the knowledge function. Where does the knowledge function become important to people is that people would always like to understand things, understand events, understand other people. Now, this is what we have been discussing as the cognitive need. Let me take a step back from this point to re-emphasize one factor. You would have observed that at different places in our lectures, we have been repeating things, going over and over about certain facts. For example, we were looking at when we were talking about what influences attitude or what helps form the attitude. Now, we discussed there the cognitive requirements of an individual as a source of forming an attitude. Logic obviously suggests that whatever can influence that attitude can also be used by marketers to change that attitude. But when we are discussing our lectures, we need to keep these two components separate. That means in one area we are studying what influences the attitude so that we are careful when we are going to be bringing about some kind of an attitude where, or when we are going to communicate a particular aspect or we will give some kind of a message to the market, we will be very careful in understanding how it will influence the attitude. However, that is not the end of the job. We may have a positive attitude at a point of time, and it is also possible that at a point of time the products might change. Now, the brand is there, but the product is changing because the contents are changing, because the environment is changing. So it might require, because it could be possible that when the product changes, it may not fit with the individual's mental schema. So logic says that we need to bring the two together, either change the person's mind to bring it compatible to the product, or we take the product to become compatible to the individual's mind. But when changes take place, we have to bring a shift, the mental shift in the consumer to be equal or bring close to the product that we are offering. This is where we must distinguish that the same thoughts, the same themes are going to be repeated in different forms as we discuss these two areas. One is influence, how things happen. Second, how it can be changed. And at this point of time, we are again talking about cognitive skill requirements, and we are forcing ourselves to think back as to how cognitive frames were used to bring an attitude or bring about a particular type of an attitude. Now we are looking at how the same frame can be used to change the attitude from either wherever it was to the new one. Or yahan, the important point is, this is definitely related to the concept of positioning. Remember, we had a little bit of a discussion on positioning because STP, which is the strategic framework for marketing, is segmentation, targeting, and positioning. So positioning change करने की ज़रूरत पड़ जाती है. Why does it happen? We have already discussed that, but I will quickly recapitulate so that we can understand the logic of our discussion currently in terms of bringing about attitudinal change. You see, you have a product which was well received in the market, and at a point of time, another product is launched which is really targeting into your product, and the people start, because of all the messages that are going through, people may start getting confused about the two products. Message कुछ ऐसा है कि वो जो आपका product है उससे मिलता जुलता है, so the people start shifting their aspect of their loyalty to your product to the new one without realizing that there is a major difference between the two products. But sometimes marketers do that. They try and bring in Me Too kind of products which are similar to the very popular ones, and most people, without realizing, start buying this product and start losing on the original brand or product. So the original brand or product has to do something. It has to bring about a change in that attitude. They have to bring about a change and create a new level for the consumer regarding their own products. And it is here that we are using this concept. So what we can sometimes do is we present barcodes, which can be comparative. We have already discussed that. But all it means is that we bring more information for the consumer to evaluate, which will favor our product or our brand. This is how we normally tend to bring about change in the motivational factors which relate to the individuals. Before I go on to the second large model, which is components of the multi-attribute model, changing them, let me re-emphasize a point, which is what is related to the positioning framework. We have been discussing bringing about change in the attitudes of the people and influencing. And we cannot forget that all this relates to the positioning aspect. And in positioning, there are some problems. If we make changes rapidly and we keep going about it in different forms, it is possible that we may confuse the consumer. So we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful if a competitive brand comes right next to us and position itself close to our own brand position, and we see some shift taking place in buying behavior of people, then we should be very careful in understanding why this buying or purchase behavior is changing or taking place, and look at the initial causes that we can think about. Maybe delivery might be a problem. Maybe the product is not available at the locations, but by just looking at the sales number, we may just wrongly assume that the people's attitude is changing. So we have to be very careful before we start thinking of bringing about change in people's attitude or the customer's attitude. There are so many other reasons that could possibly have an impact on the purchase behavior. Secondly, when we do that, we have to be very careful that when we create a new position, in our enthusiasm, in our excitement, the marketer might tend to either position it very high. और जब वो very high चला जाए, तो उसमें doubt create हो जाता है. People start feeling doubtful कि is it possibly achievable also. On the other hand, sometimes people become very conscious of their attempt because now they are into a very strong competition. There is a challenge coming in, So they try to figure out how much of a change should be brought into position, how much of a change should be brought into the attitude by using message. तो ये हो सकता है कि वो मैसेज जो है अपनी रिक्वायरमेंट से थोड़ा नीचे रह जाए, therefore the positioning might be undervalued. Now, these are the fears that marketers normally have when they should go for bringing about a change in people's attitude or customers' attitude, particularly when you are going into competition and somebody has challenged your product. पहले जब होता है तो वो obviously एक दूसरा issue है कि when we are trying to position ourselves, where we will be positioning, we might be maybe positioning all right, but we might give the product lower value than what it deserves. And I gave you an example of it when Tag Heuer, a watch, actually priced itself very low, and only when they increased the price, let's say close to about 10 times, that the market immediately realized the value of Tag Heuer and their sales grew. Now, the same reasoning must be kept in mind when we talk about bringing about change in attitude. Let's look at the last model, that is component of the multi-attribute model, and then we would like to bring change into that. What is happening in this concept or model is that we try and bring about a change or an evaluative frame for an attribute. You see, कई दफा ऐसे होता है कि कोई एक attribute है किसी भी product का जिसको अहमियत नहीं दी जा रही होती और लोग उसकी अहमियत को इग्नोर कर रहे होते. Now, if I as a marketer understand that this is particularly related to a very significant value system in the motivational frame, तो मैं उस attribute को highlight करना शुरू कर दूं. If I highlight that attribute, which is directly linked with the motivational factor, then I will definitely be able to succeed in bringing about this change. मिसाल के तौर पे, we find that we can combine two significant attributes together in our product. और इसका issue ये होता है कि when we actually launch, तो हम लोगों के concept में एक चीज है कि एक unique selling point है. अब हो सकता है unique selling point की there could be another attribute which would be sitting there, but we have ignored it for the time being because we believe that this unique selling point is going to do the job. However, it is possible that we may need to bring another attribute, so we should not be scared so long as we are careful in terms of positioning, and that the positioning should not become too over positioned or under or may lead to confusion. However, attributes can be used because हर product के अंदर कई attributes होते हैं, which is how a product is developed. Depend करता है कि target market को किस attribute की अहमियत है. And if we understand that, we can combine one or two and bring about a new thought in the mind of the consumer, and his attitude can change. Secondly, what we can do is to bring change in the brand belief itself. Now, this frame is a very common frame which is used by marketers. मिसाल के तौर पे एक product एक अरसे तक चलता रहा है, अब marketer आकर ये कहता है this is the largest selling brand in the country, or this is the best possible brand in the market, or it is better than the best. Now, these kind of overall generalizations also have a significant impact, particularly अगर एक brand कई अरसे से चल रहा हो. You most probably would have seen that companies try to give the year when the product or the brand was launched. Some brands base themselves on their old traditions. In this case, the old tradition, for example, somebody would say established in 1870. The idea that is being given is that since this product has lasted so long, it must have good virtue, and this is bringing about the change in the brand belief. Rather than giving any particular attribute or a particular frame or a particular point, it just talks about the overall product brand or its life, whatever it's been going on, it is historical, it is good. For example, in the same situation, we can also suggest that when we talk about bringing this kind of a brand belief change, we talk about, misal ke taur pe, if you realize washing machines जो हैं वो कपड़े जो हैं वो जो very light clothes जो होते हैं, the light fabric, they can damage it. Now, Palmolive washing powder, which was normally used for the washing in the machines, started promoting its product, the same washing powder, and this is a new thought that was brought into position, कि वो हाथ से जो कपड़े धोए जाते हैं उसके लिए भी ये ठीक है, particularly for the finer clothes, and it does not harm the hands. जो धोने वाले हैं उनके हाथ को नुकसान नहीं पहुंचाएंगे, क्योंकि it is suggested that the products which are used in machines would have more abrasive kind of impact. That means वो ज़्यादा हाथों को नुकसान पहुंचा सकते हैं. So Palmolive tried to promote their same machine washing powder as a product which can have very, which can be gentle on the hands and you can use it for washing. जो चीज़ याद रखने की है कि ये जो messages हैं, they have to be not only consistent and have to be repeated till a change takes place. You cannot expect कि आप एक दफ़ा कह दें कि जी this product was established in 1870 और उसके बाद भूल जाएं. You have to keep repeating that this has what is the impact or what is the importance of this particular product or brand overall. Finally, we have what we call adding an attribute. A small example is, मिसाल के तौर पे we know that कि bananas जो हैं या केला, उसके अंदर the concept is that it has lot of potassium. जो milk products होते हैं उनमें calcium होता है. अब if I want to bring a new attribute in my yogurt, that is the product that I am selling, I can start emphasizing कि yogurt में potassium की मिकदार जो है वो banana से या केले से ज़्यादा है. Now this adds to the yogurt's attributes. Yogurt calcium provide करता है. अब हम कह रहे हैं कि potassium, और potassium is a very important component. So rather than you buying yogurt and you buying bananas, you can use yogurt and it will provide you with all your requirements. This is how an attribute is added, either through knowledge or maybe through technology. अब technology में ये कैसे किया जाता है? For example, आपने देखे होंगे रेफ्रिजरेटर्स जो है वो नॉर्मली उनके अंदर कोई पानी सप्लाई करने का तरीका नहीं है. यू पुट बॉटल्स इनसाइड द रेफ्रिजरेटर टू कूल. However, new refrigerators are going to suggest that there is filtration system to dispense water also. यानी कि पीने का पानी जो है वो उनके अंदर टेक्नोलॉजिकली एडवांस ऐसे कर दिया गया कि वो ना सिर्फ कोल्ड और कूल वाटर प्रोवाइड करेगा, बट it will also be providing you with filtered water. Maybe it is linked directly with the normal taps, but rather than having a separate filtration system, the refrigerator itself will provide you with this aspect when it is connected with the tap and the filtration takes place and the water is cooled. Now this is technologically advanced attribute that you can suggest, and देखा ये गया है research में कि जो टेक्नोलॉजिकल एडवांस एट्रीब्यूट्स होते हैं जो नए आते हैं, they have more significant appeal. This more significant appeal which comes from technological advances is actually more lasting for the simple reason that it can be seen that that is what is happening. On the other side, like I said, if you try and bring about a new attribute like in the case of a yogurt, then it is there. People can't see it. People will have to listen to it, come to a belief point and then bring about a change कि वाकई योगर्ट जो है, और more information ली जाएगी कि क्या वाकई योगर्ट में केले से ज़्यादा पोटेशियम है और उसके लिए तरीकाकार कुछ और है. लेकिन if technological advanced attributes are added तो उसकी जो impact है वो कहीं ज़्यादा है. अभी तक what we were discussing was basically कि attitude पहले आता है और behavior बाद में आता है, और इस हवाले से we have been discussing all along how attitudes are brought into position, how attributes are changed, and so on and so forth. But अब एक research, not एक research, काफ़ी research इस हवाले से भी हुई है attitudes में कि behavior पहले आता है और attitude बाद में बनता है. We have already discussed that in the initial stages, but we will take a little bit of an in-depth view of this particular aspect and see कि कहीं हम गलती ना कर जाएं, बिकॉज कई दफ़ा बिहेवियर हो सकता है विदाउट रियलाइजेशन फॉर वट एवर रीजन कैन बी जनरेटेड, एंड इस पे आई हैव बीन डिस्कसिंग इट क्वाइट एक्सटेंसिवली. तो अब इशू ये है कि अगर एटीट्यूड बिहेवियर के बाद है और बिहेवियर पहले आए तो उसके क्या रीजंस हो सकते हैं, और हाउ कैन वी ब्रिंग अबाउट दिस इनटू प्ले व्हेन we are going to be marketers who have to be able to handle these issues. Now, there are three particular aspects in this area which we need to look at. एक है कि cognitive dissonance पैदा होती है, जिसको हम post purchase behavior भी कहते हैं. इशू ये है कि कई दफ़ा एक ही चीज़ के हवाले से we have conflicting attitudes, और उसकी वजह क्या होती है? आपने एक चीज़ खरीद ली और आपके ऑब्वियसली जब आपने वो चीज़ उठाई तो और बहुत से प्रोडक्ट्स भी वहाँ थे. नाउ आपने चीज़ तो उठा ली, लेकिन अब आपके माइंड में नेगेटिव थॉट्स आने शुरू हो गए. व्हाई? बिकॉज देयर आर सर्टेन एट्रीब्यूट्स यू स्टार्ट रियलाइजिंग कि जो प्रोडक्ट्स मैंने नहीं खरीदे उनमें वो एट्रीब्यूट्स हैं. अब ये एक, हालांकि आपका पहला एटीट्यूड जो था वो पॉजिटिव था, आपने प्रोडक्ट खरीदा, बट व्हेन यू वर बाइंग द प्रोडक्ट और व्हेन यू हैड बॉट द प्रोडक्ट, आपको कुछ इंफॉर्मेशन you received which shows that the other products that you left had certain other attributes. These attributes which you have now left behind may start seeming to be important to you. In marketing, we have already discussed this in terms of post-purchase behavior. Ab issue to hai, the problem basically is, if we do not resolve this issue then and there, it is possible that the positive attitude for the product might change into the negative attitude, or you might start getting disturbed and so on and so forth. So we will look at how we can handle it. But before we do that, let's look at what a consumer does to resolve his own conflict. Obviously, consumer kuch to kadam uthayega to be able to resolve this dissonance, and dissonance is basically जो एक सिस्टम में डिस्टर्बेंस आ जाती है उसको डिसोनेंस बोलते हैं. तो अब ये कंज्यूमर जिसने एक प्रोडक्ट खरीदा बिकॉज उसके एटीट्यूड पहले पॉजिटिव थे, उसने हो सकता है काफ़ी मटेरियल पढ़ा हो और उस मटेरियल के पढ़ने के बाद उसने ये जजमेंट ली हो और जाके चीज़ खरीद ली. अब खरीदने के बाद उसको सडनली इंफॉर्मेशन मिलती है कि कुछ और एट्रीब्यूट्स ऐसे हैं जो दूसरे प्रोडक्ट्स के अंदर हैं और उसने उन पे गौर ही नहीं किया था. अब जब वो खरीद ले, और पर्टिकुलरली इफ दिस परचेज इज अ कॉस्टली परचेज, तो ही स्टार्ट्स गेटिंग डिस्टर्ब. अब वो क्या करेगा? दैट इज द क्वेश्चन दैट वी नीड टू फर्स्ट फाइंड आउट and also then try and see how we can help him. अब वो करेगा क्या कि वो पहले तो रैशनलाइज करने की कोशिश करेगा अपने डिसीजन को, यानी कि कोग्निटिवली वो ये सोचना शुरू करेगा कि जो चीज़ें मैंने छोड़ दी या दोज प्रोडक्ट्स दैट आई हैव लेफ्ट, वो जो एट्रीब्यूट्स हैं वो मेरे लिए इतने इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं हैं. सो ही विल ट्राई एंड रिड्यूस द इम्पॉर्टेंस ऑफ दोज एट्रीब्यूट्स which he later on found were available in the competitors or the other brand. So he will try and start rationalizing internally. अब ये एक एस्पेक्ट है इंटरनल बिहेवियर का कि वो खुद अपने तौर पे वो इस चीज़ को रिजॉल्व करने की कोशिश करे. दूसरा वो क्या करेगा? What he will try and do is to start looking for more information which will try and confirm कि उसने जो चीज़ खरीदी वो ठीक है. Now he will try and do this by positively seeking information which will reinforce those attributes which he initially thought were important. अब वो दूसरे attributes को गिराने की कोशिश नहीं कर रहा, बल्कि उन attributes को reinforce कर रहा है जिसके बेस पे उसने initially ये product खरीदे थे. And for that purpose, he will most probably look at magazines, go on the computer, read information, and so on and so forth. So he will keep forcing himself to rationalize his decision on the positive side. Third, वो क्या करेगा? He will most probably, to confirm himself, to get out of this negative thing, he will start telling his friends कि इस product के अंदर अच्छी चीजें कौन सी हैं. Obviously, at this point of time, psychologically, he's shutting his mind off to those negative things, but he is trying to promote the positive ones and trying to convince his friends that this product has the good things. और अब अगर एक भी उसका दोस्त या उसका friend, family member वही product खरीद लेता है, the person will become satisfied because now he will have confirmation कि जो चीज़ मैंने खरीदी थी वो ठीक खरीदी थी. फाइनली व्हाट ही विल ट्राई एंड डू इज कि वो कोशिश करेगा ऐसे लोगों को ढूंढने के लिए या मिलने की कोशिश करेगा जिन्होंने वो प्रोडक्ट खरीदा हो, सो दैट ही कैन कम्युनिकेट विद देम एंड फाइंड कंफर्ट इन अ ग्रुप. अब ये 4 चीजें काफी इंपॉर्टेंट हैं. इफ यू वॉच, अब हम ये क्या रहे हैं कि ये चीज खरीदने के बाद हो सकता है उसके अंदर नेगेटिव एटीट्यूड पैदा होना शुरू कर जाए. सो व्हाट वी आर ट्राइंग टू नाउ से इज कि ठीक है, पहले पॉजिटिव एटीट्यूड था, बट अब उसने खरीद लिया और अब एटीट्यूड चेंज करने लगा है. तो मार्केटर हैज टू डू समथिंग. ही कैन नॉट इग्नोर दिस पॉइंट. ही कैन नॉट से कि ठीक है, नाउ आई हैव सोल्ड द प्रोडक्ट और अब ये मेरी प्रॉब्लम नहीं रही. इट इज अ प्रॉब्लम ऑफ द कंज्यूमर, हाउ ही हैंडल्स इट. वी हैव टू हेल्प हिम rationalize, renegotiate with himself that whatever he has done is correct. Many methods are available, and we try and use these by sometimes adding guarantees. We give more warranties. We also add into the product a small manual which tries to confirm कि जो चीज़ आपने खरीदी वो बिल्कुल ठीक खरीदी और उसमें क्या क्या फायदे हैं, एंड उसमें कंपैरेटिव इंफॉर्मेशन भी दी जाए. एंड यू डू ऑल दीज थिंग्स. इन टर्म्स ऑफ नाउ, I will not be able to say anything about how I will force the person to go and tell others, but there is definitely a thing that we can do. What we call is when the person wants to find other buyers and feel comfort in a group. So वहाँ क्या किया जा रहा है आजकल दुनिया में, that brand communities are being created. People are encouraged to share a blog on the computer if they have bought a product, so that these people start finding other people on the computer or internet and start sharing their information, their views. They start reading that information. They ask questions from their friends or those people who've also bought the same product, and find comfort in this close association. These brand communities are becoming very critical. Now, having discussed this, we need to also understand that there are certain levels of dissonance. और ये dissonance का यही नहीं है कि हर टाइम जो dissonance है वो बहुत impact करेगा. कई दफ़ा ये dissonance थोड़े भी होते हैं, बिल्कुल हल्के होते हैं, which can be overcome by some other method. Sometimes they are very strong. There are high levels of dissonance where people try and give a lot of comfort in terms of, like I said, warranties, even in terms of getting other buyers to come together in a group or a membership, which we call communities. So these are the facts that we were looking at on how attitudes can change after the purchase has taken place. This brings us to the end of the lecture. We have been discussing up till now change in attitude, and we've also looked at certain models. We have discussed that, so we have more or less covered this particular aspect. In the next lecture, which I will pick up, would be related to the theory of why does a person buy a certain thing or behave in a particular manner. This is known as the attribution theory, and we will look at why people believe that they have done something. उसकी वजह ये है कि कई दफ़ा जब आप कोई अच्छी चीज़ करते हैं तो you normally attribute it to yourself, और कोई गलती हो जाए तो वो आप किसी और के ऊपर इल्ज़ाम डालते हैं. तो ये एक ऐसा concept है which has to be looked at by marketers before we move on to the communication theory. At this point, I will request that you look at the notes and make sure that you understand why attribution theory is also important. Okay, thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.